Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for October week of training. Hello and welcome. Thank you. We are here today to join us. More than a nugget, chicken basics. Our speaker is ready to answer most frequently asked questions about chicken and explain how it benefits your world. He is one you might call a chicken expert. With over 10 years of experience in the school food service industry, and he's also our FSNA Sustaining Industry Partner Representative, introducing Jose Herrera. I
Good.
apologize
No,
for
that's good enough.
butchering that last name. Jose, take it away, please.
Thank you.
Thank
Well, hello,
you.
everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, today we will be discussing Chicken 101. It's basically a very high level overview of the chicken industry, as well as a very high level on some of the most popular chicken cuts out there, so that you guys have an understanding of one, how we get to those cuts and how they're actually processed and made. So joining me today, again, my name is Jose Herrera. I am your sustaining industry partner, and I am your regional sales manager for the state of Florida for Pilgrims. Quincy Wiley is joining us on the line today as well. He's our regional sales manager out of the Midwest, but is a expert when it comes to the actual chicken industry. So I brought him along so he can answer some other questions and collaborate as well with us. Let me go ahead and just click along here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera for the time being because I find myself to be distracted by it. So please let me just go ahead and click on that. There we go. And let's move slides. There we go. So first, a big thank you to all of the sponsors that have taken part in sponsoring the October week of training. Much appreciated. The FSNA appreciates it, and we appreciate your patronage. So getting to know me. There are some people on here that may know me. There are some people that may not know me. You've kind of already seen me in video, so the joke might be out a little bit. But this is me. And this is what I looked like back in March 10th of 2020. We've gone through quite some difficult times since then. So those of you that do know me, don't be surprised when you see me next. That's kind of what I look like now. And that's a picture of October 20th, 2020. We've got Quincy on the line, as I mentioned, Quincy Wiley. This was Quincy Wiley back, I think, in 1998, March 10th of 1998. And here we've got Quincy Wiley again today, October 20th. He's done very well in the aging process.
I'm like the Paul Rudd of the chicken industry.
So he's done very well. So today's agenda, really important for you guys to know. There are only a total of 25 slides and 2 short videos. I kind of tell you guys that because everybody is very sometimes conscientious of what's going on, what's transpiring, and that way you can follow along. So if you're keeping tally, we're actually on slide 5 now. And then again, we have 2 short videos involved, so a total of 27 slides. I'm going to try to do what I can to keep everything very light today. Really, honestly, I sincerely hope that what you do take away is something that you didn't know before today. If you take away 2 things, that's even better. If you take away none, I will probably refer you over to our career section of our website, where you should possibly apply for a job because we could use your expertise. And then this is my little guess what chicken butt. So in today's agenda, part 1 is going to be a poultry industry overview. It's going to be a 20-minute presentation. And I don't know if we're open to question and answer, if we're able to open our mics on this platform, but if not, I'm sure you might be able to type in some of your questions and we will do our best to answer them. So again, we're going to break this up a little bit to kind of break the monotony of it. 20 minutes in presentation, 10 minutes Q&A. It may not take the whole 10 minutes. That's fine. We'll move along to the next segment and you might have more questions about part 2. Part 2 is actually where we're going to get into the different chicken cuts and actually chicken processing in itself. And again, 20-minute presentations there with a 10-minute question and answer at the end. So if you do have any questions, try to hold off until those particular points, and then we can move from there. This picture actually was sent to me by a friend of mine who is a not a chicken farmer, but he raises chickens. So he said people who take care of chickens are literally known as chicken tenders. So I thought that was comical, and I included it in our little presentation for today. So the poultry industry. We're going to kind of quickly navigate on some data here. We're going to break it up really into three parts. What the poultry industry was like about 60 years ago when metrics really started being measured as far as consumption in the United States and product consumption and beef and pork and poultry. So we're going to take some metrics from back then. We're going to compare them to where we are now as far as the poultry industry. And then we're going to touch on some things about what it's going to look like in the future of the poultry industry. Really, there's a positive outlook for the future of the industry, but we'll get to that here in a second. Oh, one clarification that I would like to make. Even though I do work for Pilgrims, everything that you're seeing on this slide, I've tried to keep it as general as possible, including the two videos. I've tried to make sure that there isn't any proprietary information being shared. Anything that we're going to cover here really is going to be generic, specific to any poultry processor, and you can really apply it to any of those processors as well. Okay, so here's some interesting facts about the poultry industry. In 1960, per capita consumption of red meat was 133 pounds a year. That means that every American was consuming, on average, 133 pounds of red meat. Poultry only represented 34 pounds at that time. Fast forward to 2019, and Americans are consuming 110 pounds of red meat a year, while poultry is now 112 pounds a year. So in that time frame, poultry has really, for all the advantageous purposes of health, perceived health, sustainability, poultry has really become America's #1 leading protein.
One quick call out is that red meat includes both pork and beef. So poultry is outselling, especially for the home, both pork and beef combined.
Yeah, and Quincy, please feel free to chime in whenever you want. I'll try and give you a little pause here after the slide so you can chime in if you need to. So I call it a popularity. I was going to call it a poultry contest, but then I said, let's call it a popularity contest. So in 1983, the poultry industry processed approximately 83 million chickens per week, 63 million small birds, and 20 million large birds. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail of what it means, small bird and large bird, and why there's a distinction in size. But for here, we're going to talk about just last time it was 1960. Now we're actually shortening this up only back to 1983. And we're going to see the difference from 1983 till today, where now we're processing approximately 170 million birds. And again, the number of those birds, 40 million are small birds and 130 million are large birds. And again, we're going to talk a little bit here further about what the difference in size means, but keep this statistic in mind as we move forward when we're talking about the difference of the size of the bird. And we kind of already mentioned this, that Americans consume more chicken than anyone else in the world, more than 112 pounds per capita in 2019, the #1 protein consumed in the United States. Okay, so why the different sizes? This is one of the most common questions I get is why is there a large bird? Why is there a small bird? Why can't they all be the same size? Well, the reality of it is the US poultry industry really uses 3 sizes. The small bird, which is a 4-pound live weight or 2-pound processed weight or dress weight, as they call it, is really used for the fast food industry, specifically the breast size. This particular size chicken provides the right size breast that is used by most of the fast food industry as far as a whole muscle product that's typically breaded that you see in the chicken war sandwich. That typically comes from this size chicken, and that's why the fast food industry drives that as well. Mostly the reason why that's driven by the fast food industry. The 5.75 pound bird or the 4.2 pound dress weight bird is your retail bird. That's what you typically see at the grocery store. That's cut up into segments, parts, whole birds. That is what drives that particular segment of the business. The larger bird is typically used for deboning and exporting. you want to think of this as your further processed chicken. Doesn't mean that these two don't fall into further processed, but the majority of processing or handling of processing bird is used using the deboning or the largest bird there. Okay. One of the interesting facts that we touch on also is how much to get these birds to these size, the amount of feed that's actually required by the U.S. poultry industry. It's always good to consider and to think about when you're getting and you're feeding birds. So what are we using to feed birds? We're using corn, 36 million tons of corn or 1.3 billion bushels a year. So the poultry industry is also sustaining the corn industry and in part sustaining the soybean meal industry, because 13 million tons and 540, million bushels are used to help support and feed the poultry industry. So not only do we support our industry, we also support the feed industry in general. So I use this as what came first, the chicken or the egg, the old story. Well, here we talk about what came first is who owns what and what does what in the poultry industry. So the poultry industry in general, 98% of all the processors, we use what's called vertical integration business model. What that means is that we as a company, we own the processing plant. We also own the feed mill. We own the hatchery. Now, why are these three things important? Number one, obviously the processing plant, because that's how you get your end product. The feed mill is important for us to control as well, because that way we can determine or control what is fed to the product that we are providing to you. And the hatchery is important that we own as well, because the hatchery is really where it all begins. That's where we make sure that the proper breeding is taking place. If there's any type of inoculation that happens, it typically starts at the hatchery process. Even on the NAE side, if we're not adding antibiotics to the egg, we want to make sure that the eggs are being handled properly to mitigate any kind of illnesses that can be created by it. So those three parts are really important that we own. The broilers is basically the name of what a chicken is that's used to be processed. And we control the broilers, the breeders, and the stock. So we want to make sure that we're breeding the proper stock that is going to generate the best outcome for our finished product. And then again, going back, we owe to feed the eggs and the transportation process. What do the farmers do? In the virtual integration business model, the farmer owns the chicken houses. They provide the water, the heat, and the care. And normally they sign a contract with any company, and they're paid based upon the number of pounds that they produce, as well as how much they can serve in feeding. So if you've ever heard or seen stories on this, they're paid on how big the chickens are, but they're also paid on how little food they give the chickens to get them that big, which kind of sounds cruel, but it's an applied science and it's a math, and they're responsible for that aspect of it. And obviously they're responsible for the grade and the flock health as well. Now, Quincy, do you have anything you'd like to chime in on this one? Because I know this is an area that you.
Yeah. So one of the big things is with the farmers and talking about the feed is they get paid on how many chickens grow up to a maturity. And so one of the things that Jose talked about with the small bird and the large bird is the only difference between the small bird and the large bird is how long they spend in the chicken house. A small bird is taken for processing after a few weeks, where a few weeks longer, it's a large bird. Chickens will continually eat as long as they're on the ground like that. So that's really the only difference between a small bird and a large bird is how long they're in the chicken houses. And then we do control all aspects. So we have the eggs, they hatch, and then we send them right away to the farms for the farmers to take care of. So the farmers have to be located fairly close to a hatchery right there. And then they provide everything from there. And so there's all of that. And also I did want to have, real quickly, there are two questions that I want to answer real quick in the chat function. And one of those is about different breeds of chickens. Is there a taste difference between the different breeds of chicken? And really, there's not. There might be a little bit on marketing about, oh, this one's better than that one. But it's very different from like the cattle industry where they talk about like Black Angus versus heifer and so forth like that. Heifer is not the right word, but Hereford is what I meant to say. So there's really not a taste difference between different breeds of chickens. And then also there was a question about chickens recovered from the loss of the bird flu. And the answer is yes. One of the nice parts about chickens is they don't take very long to grow. So when you look at your entire protein across the board, whether it be cattle, pigs, or chicken, cattle take the longest to grow, where followed by pigs, and then chicken take very, very little amount of time. It's measured in weeks, not years, or even months, where hogs are measured in months and then cattle are measured in years on that part of it. So it didn't take them very long to recover from the bird flu like that. They eat a lot of corn and so forth like that. And the joke is always chickens are nothing more than corn with legs because they eat so much of it. But yeah, if the whole flock got wiped out, we would be able to repopulate that by St. Patrick's Day.
And that was actually, Quincy, a great information, but also a great segue, because you were talking about, the growth cycle depends on the product. And kind of, I just fast forwarded the slides a little bit. And here really it shows us the two most popular sizes, again, which is the fast food small bird. Again, in school, we kind of work in small bird and large bird as well. So the fast food, the small bird takes about anywhere between 36 to 40 days, 39 days to get to its size. And then the tray pack, which is the lard bird, just like he mentioned, it's really only a week longer or a couple of weeks long, or if that, to get to the size. So really, it's not that much of a difference. Like they said, they're constantly eating, they're constantly growing.
And one of the reasons for the differences between small bird and large bird is the most consumed cut in the United States is the breast. And so larger birds have larger breast meat, so that way it can be trimmed so it's equal and it's consistent across the board. So if you go to the grocery store and you get a family pack and it has 8 in there, each one of those fillets look the same. So we'll talk about how they cut them and what they do with that part of it. But that's really the reason for the move to large bird from small bird. And because it's just that white meat, there's more white meat on a large bird than there is on a small bird. And that's what the US population really prefers. And if you look at that picture in the background, that's in one of the grow houses, and you can see the chickens drinking in that little contraption up there. And that actually gets raised as the chickens grow. It goes up, so it's closer to the ground when they're hatchlings, and then it grows up as they mature.
I told you he knows everything there is to know about chickens. Okay, so the future and beyond. It's expected, even with all of the impact of COVID, that chicken should continue its growth trends over the next 30 years. There's nothing that's indicating that that's going to change. As a matter of fact, more and more chicken fast food chains are popping up. You're seeing a lot more poultry being offered on menus. You're seeing a lot more of creative ideas being formed around chicken and poultry. So really, there's nothing to indicate that the growing trend or the popularity trend of chicken should change in any way, even including a pandemic affecting it to a degree. Sustainability is an integral part of the poultry industry. Kind of going back to a couple of slides back where we talked about how we support the feed industry to help support our industry. One of the things that we always focus on as an industry in general, and it's every processor kind of works together on this, is to make sure that we're working on providing a product that we know is going to be able to be there for our growth as a population. And we're taking steps to make sure that that's happening as an industry in general. So it's not one thing that one company is doing. It's one thing that in general, the entire industry is doing. And it has to do with just the development of technologies and processes on how to make sure that in the future, as we grow as a population, we're always going to have the ability to produce poultry and produce chicken for our habits or eating habits. NA and clean label, that's obviously been something that's been on the vernacular here for quite some time now. What we're thinking and what we're seeing with as far as the trends are concerned, there was a time where that was a want. There was a very specific ask from people saying we want the no antibiotic ever because we don't want to be eating or consuming added antibiotics in our diet. We want it to be clean because we don't want any added ingredients in our product. So that really was a want, I would say, over the last probably 10 years 5 years maybe really emphasized on that. But I think as we move forward into the future, that want is going to become an absolute need, because of the way things are just progressing in culture and in our mindset. So I think in the future, I think the entire industry may move into that direction. But again, I think it's just when it becomes the need versus the want right now that's going to drive that outcome. And then consumer trends. And I mentioned this earlier before, the chicken sandwich war. Consumer trends will always drive any sales market that exists out there, whether it's in a vehicle, whether it's in, if you think back 15 years ago, the hybrid vehicle came into the market and every single car manufacturer went out in a mad dash to create a hybrid vehicle. Now hybrid has just become, now that's an old school because now we have electric vehicles. So consumer trends will always drive any industry, and consumer trends here will also continue to drive industry. And what those trends are, well, again, going back to the NAE, clean label, less processed, more whole muscle, those are all trends that we're starting to see as people want to see cleaner products that they're familiar with. So if they look at a piece of chicken, it looks like a piece of chicken. So those are the things that we're expecting that's going to drive the future of our business, is a lot of what the consumer wants. Quincy, any comments on here?
Yeah, real quickly about clean label. You might see things like hormone free, not always understand what that means. So it has been illegal since the 50s to add any sort of growth hormones in hogs and chicken. That is not the same for cattle. So that's a different thing that's set off to the side. So if you see hormone free on your chicken, well, of course it is. All chicken that is processed in the United States is hormone free. It does not have any added growth hormones or anything like that. And then the no antibiotic ever, chickens are sometimes treated as big groups. And so that's when they get treated for antibiotics, so they don't pass along the bird flu and things along those lines. So no antibiotics ever. What that means a lot of times is if you have a flock and it becomes sick, then you have to quarantine the entire flock off to the side. And so that's kind of the difference. Responsible use of antibiotics, you'll see that sometimes. Certified responsible crew, use of antibiotics. That just means if there is a sickness, then they do add the antibiotics later like that. Remember, antibiotics cost money. So those farmers that are doing that, they don't always want to use the antibiotics because it will cost them extra money. So the no antibiotics ever on the clean label is things that are very important to the poultry industry because it's very important to the consumer. And that's one of the things that Jose was kind of touching on right there with the fact of the need versus the want. The industry always will gravitate towards what is the want of the consumer. And so that's where we go. And that is also with the consumer trends. When you talk about chicken sandwich war, when you talk about whole muscle versus made with whole muscle and so forth like that, we will always go towards what the customer is telling us they want.
Thank you, Quincy, again. All right, so now we've reached our first moment of questions. So I don't know, and maybe somebody can chime in from the FSNA here. Are we able to open up microphones to questions, or do we want it to come in via writing? How would you want to proceed with this?
They can put their questions in the chat box or the Q&A box if they have any.
All right, very good. All right, so we've got a few minutes here to answer some questions. So if you do have some questions, please feel free to type them in. If not, we'll move along. And in the meantime, I'll put my little other piece of my slide here, which is, I dream of a world where chickens can cross the road without having their motives questioned. Again, I told you I was going to try to keep this light, maybe a little corny, but I was going to try to keep this light. And we'll give it a few more minutes here. We're good on time, so we can answer a few questions if there are any. Hopefully we're not boring you to death on chicken. This next part is going to get fun with actually the cutting of them and the different cuts. This is to me, the more exciting part of it. Maybe not. All right. Well, Quincy, keep an eye on those questions and answers. If you see anybody type anything in there, let me know. But so far, I don't see anything coming in there. So we're just going to go ahead and kind of move along a little bit.
Sounds good.
All right. Let me close this out so I can see what I'm doing. And so part 2 is specific cuts. If you look here on the left-hand side, this is the quickest, easy way to look at a chicken, as it is cut up into 8 parts. So you've got 2 drums, you've got 2 legs here, actually 2 thighs as well, which are broken off over here, 2 wings, and 2 breasts. And while Quincy made a reference to this is the most popular part of the chicken is the chicken breast, these little guys over here are pretty popular as well, which is the chicken wing. But when we look at our video that's coming up here in the future, I'm going to pause it for you to kind of show you when we're talking about the school mindset to always keep in mind the white meat versus the dark meat. So your white meat on a chicken is the chicken breast and the chicken wings. Your dark meat is the legs and the thighs. But again, we always have to keep that there's a balance when you're purchasing or what you're making decisions to buy chicken to make sure you're buying the whole chicken, just because if not, there's really nothing to do with one side or the other. So we're going to talk about that here a little bit further. But without further ado, so again, just to kind of be clear, I did everything I could to keep this as generic as possible. So without showing anything proprietary, I kind of went online and I found a little video of a gentleman who kind of cuts up a chicken. I thought it would be interesting to show how a chicken gets cut up into the 8 parts. And again, it's part of an educational series from Martha Stewart. But I figured that would be the least offensive, most generic thing that I could find for us to use. So I've got to switch my audio here for just a second for this to work. So you won't be able to hear me anymore, which is probably a good thing.
Hey everybody, Thomas Joseph here. We all like to save money, right? Well, here is a fast and easy way to do it. Buying a whole chicken in your grocery store and cutting it up into 8 pieces yourself is really simple to do, and it will end up saving you money. And with practice, you should be able to do this in about a minute. I have my chicken here on a cutting board. The drumsticks are facing me because that's what I'm going to start with first. So all you need is a chef's knife and a pair of scissors to do this, and a cutting board that is big enough to accommodate butchering the chicken. So here we go. Starting with the drumsticks, slice the skin. You can see the joint pop up. Cut right in between the joint. Popping the joint, cutting right through, turn the chicken on the side, cut off the wings, make a small cut on each side of the wing, and you should be able to pop the wing out, and you repeat the process over on this side. Now you use scissors to cut down the backbone. We're not counting the backbone as one of the 8 pieces, but what you should do is just throw this into a resealable plastic bag and throw it in your freezer for whenever you're making chicken stock. And then you cut right through the breastbone. And there you go. One last piece. You're going to cut the drumstick and the thigh in half right behind the line of fat closest to the drumstick. And you should be able to glide your knife right in between the 2 joints. So there you have it. In about a minute, you have 8 pieces of chicken that you can cook with whatever recipe you'd like. You have a backbone for stock, and you have a little extra cash in your pocket. So kitchen conundrum for you.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me again. Hopefully you were able to hear the video. I didn't hear anybody complain about it, so I'm thinking everybody heard the video. So this is a perfect opportunity to kind of show you. So on this left-hand side here, you've got a whole chicken, and then over here, you've got the actual chicken cut up into parts. Now I'm going to kind of further dissect these a little bit. Let me see if I can use this here to use my laser pointer.
Real quickly, while Jose's doing that, this is an example of a small bird. This would not be a large bird. If you go to your grocery store and you buy a chicken whole like that, chances are it will be a small bird.
Very good. Okay, so looking at this right here, I'm going to kind of just dissect this a little bit further, just so that we get an understanding. So if you kind of look at it and break this page in half right here, this is your dark meat, this is your white meat. So whenever you're processing or commodity processing chicken, you want to make sure that you're processing the whole bird, because if you're just processing the white meat, you're leaving all of this behind. Now, there are products out there that are naturally proportioned, meaning that they have both white and dark. And we can get into that discussion a little bit later and answer some questions on that as well. But I also wanted to point out that when you look at a wing, the wing actually gets broken up into really 3 segments. So this is your drummy, this is your flat, and this is what some people would call your handlebar. When you're purchasing wings out there, if you're ever looking at some specifics on an order or whatnot, first and second joint means these two pieces right here. If you see a V wing, that basically means you get the drummy cut, and this actually still has the handlebar attached. Some places prefer it with the handlebar, some places don't. Moving along to the breast, over here you've got the major pectoral muscle, which is on the top. And then just underneath here, you can kind of make it out a little bit, is where your actual tenderloin is. It's kind of underneath this little flap right here. But that is, so every chicken has 2 breasts and 2 tenderloins. And we're going to talk a little bit further about the tenderloin, but I want to make that distinction because typically, even though they come together, they're actually separated from each other when they become processed. And then again, here you've got your chicken thighs, and then you've got your chicken drums, which comprise the rest of the dark meat. So I just wanted to make that clear distinction for you guys as we did this cutting here. Quincy, any added to it?
No, I was going to say that if you're ever in a chicken processing plant, so what they do is they put that bird on a cone, and then each person, as they go down the line, they have their own cut that they need to make. So somebody cuts off the wings, and somebody cuts off the breast and the thighs and the drumsticks. So that's the way it goes down. And so that way they can get each one of the cuts separated out. They don't just do it on a big cutting board like that. That's done mostly in the back of the house for chefs.
Right. Yeah, this was just an example of a cutting. I found something generic and it was kind of nice.
No, I think it was great.
Okay, let's get rid of it. Okay. So we were talking a little bit about the tenderloin. So I kind of did this in a little bit of play of fun, because one of the pieces of or cuts of chicken that most we have a lot of questions about, and there's a lot of, I wouldn't call it complaints, but there are concerns because maybe you saw one product and when you saw something else, it didn't look the same or perform the same, or you've gone to one restaurant and you've ordered a chicken tender and it was a certain way. You go to another restaurant and it's a different way. You still ordered a chicken tender, but you're saying to yourself, why are they so different? And the reality of it is, can you pick which one here in this particular picture is a true tenderloin versus what the industry knows to be a chicken tender? And I've been working in the poultry industry for some time. Quincy has as well. And you'd find it really difficult to be able to distinguish which one. I mean, I could probably pick a couple of them, like the far right one might be, but it looks a little big. Maybe the two on the left, on the lower left, maybe those. But again, it's really difficult to distinguish it unless you actually cut into it or bite into the product. And let's clarify what makes it different. So the true tenderloin, this is the minor pectoral muscle that comes from the inside of the breast adjacent to the keel bone. So it literally rests up against the keel bone just underneath the breast. So the chicken tenderloins are specific to the entire breast muscle. Now, what happens is in the industry, we have what's called a strip or a tender. Now, this is important for you guys to know when you're doing your bids, when you're processing your bids and your specifications, if there's anybody out there that's involved in that. Also, when you're serving it, when you're looking at a box, whatever it might be, it's important for you guys to know this distinction, because a true tenderloin, whole muscle, comes from where it comes from. A strip or a tender can actually be a slice cut, and it could come from dark meat, it can come from white meat, it can come from both. It can be breaded, it can be unbreaded. So it's basically, it could be made with whole muscle or further processed. And again, the term chicken tender, chicken finger, or chicken strip are typically used when you're describing something that is similar to a true tenderloin, but isn't. So just be aware of a lot of that terminology, because that's where we can run into problems, especially when you're trying to observe price conscientiousness. Typically, it could be a little bit more expensive when you're dealing with a true tenderloin versus a strip. Quincy, I kind of heard you maybe wanted to chime in there.
No, yeah, exactly. I was just going to say the tenderloin is a USDA defined cut of the chicken. So it has to say on the outside of the box, chicken breast tenderloin, or, breast tenderloin is what you normally see. Tender and strips are, they are not USDA recognized terms. So they can mean a variety of different things, just like Jose mentioned.
And we're actually going to show you a little video later on in the process of how chicken strips are actually processed from whole muscle, and it'll kind of bring this whole slide together. And that's just a few slides down, so we're not too far from that. So now breading types. I just wanted to touch real quick on breading types. One, because it's another contention. It's another point of differentiation between products. You see various different types of breading that are on this actual picture. You see some that looks to be a lot of breading. You see some to be lightly breaded. There's a couple in there that have specks on it and little dots on it. Those specks are not burn marks. Those might be pepper or flavor profiling that's added to the breading, because typically breading is where the majority of the flavor profile is added to a chicken strip or a chicken tender. So I just wanted to show you guys that real quick. And then another thing we're going to notice is when you're looking at boxes or you're looking at product, I just want to make this distinction as well. The term fritter. Now, when we're talking about the term fritter, you're talking about a product that has 30% breading or more is what's required for us to say it's a fritter. We're not required as an industry to identify anything more than 30%. So that means, again, when you're doing your process of creating bids and you want to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck, or you're getting the right type of product you want, because there's nothing wrong with breading if you want breading. If you don't want breading, you want to be conscious of this. And so a product can have 50% breading and still be called a fritter, 60%, 70% breading and still be called a fritter. So just wanted to make that clear, and so that you have that in your mind as you guys are moving along in any of your specifications or bid writing process. So coating system, basically you can have a batter, which is more of a tempura, which is more of a wet type application. Breading is actually that in itself, what you're thinking of breading, or a flour that's used to enhance the texture or the flavor of the product. And obviously in the K-12 segment, we use a whole lot of the whole grain breading. Again, similar process to all the rest, except the grains that are used in the breading process are whole grain. So popcorn chicken. And I think earlier Quincy made a reference that chickens are what? Walking corn or something like that, you had said, or something like that?
Corn with legs.
Corns with legs, that's what it is. So popcorn chicken. Well, popcorn chicken is not a chicken eating popcorn. Popcorn chicken, basically, I want to say one of the major fast food chains a few years back, probably about 30 years back, as a marketing campaign to drive sales, came up with the popcorn chicken idea, which basically is, small bite-sized chicken pieces that somewhat resemble popcorn in their shape and size. So it was almost like really creative to look at it. Oh, it looks like popcorn. Let's call it popcorn chicken. But it does have some benefits. One, we talked about using the whole bird. There are combinations where you can use a combination of both to make a popcorn chicken. So it makes it easy to process commodities. But there are also white meat and dark meat options if that is your preference. Another thing is they're typically they are a further processed product, meaning that they do have some kind of binder and filler, but not always. There is a potential for them to be made from whole muscle or whole muscle as well. And it's convenient and it's fun. Kids absolutely love popcorn chicken. They just love the portability of it. They love the little containers that they come in sometimes, and it's a great little product. The next guy that we're going to talk about is the good old chicken nugget. Now, this is a little funny thing that I saw, because it says nutritionists say limit your fast food intake to once a week, and I say, okay, I'm going to limit it to once a week. There's my chicken nugget. But chicken nuggets carry a bad stigma, and in reality, I don't believe they should. And maybe rightly so, maybe because of the fast food industry and because of what has been done with chicken nuggets and how it's been pushed onto America's youth and whatnot. So maybe I can understand the stigma behind it. But the reality of it is, if you didn't know, so contrary to popular belief, the nugget was invented by a Cornell University food service professor in 1950. So it was not invented by a fast food chain, as most people believe it to be. And this professor, what he was actually doing, he was actually trying to find a way to better bind ground meats. and be able to form them. At the time, there really wasn't anything that existed out there that was a good process on how to get ground beef and kind of reshape it and form it into something so that you can use it for a different application. So that was what his goal was, really, was trying to get that. And from that was born the chicken nugget. Again, it has a bad reputation for being unhealthy. I think a lot of it has to do because of the fast food industry, and we can all understand and appreciate that. But the reality of it is the chicken nugget is it's made in very different ways. It's true that some of the fast food companies do require skin to be placed back into it, and they use that for moisture and fat. I think actually I have that here. Yeah, they use that for moisture and fat. But again, that's the fast food industry. Typically, when we're working in our K-12 segment, that's not the case at all. But I always talk about the nugget because the nugget is very versatile. It's a product that's out there. We shouldn't shy away from it. Kids love it, and it is a good product if it's spec'd and purchased right. So the next item we have is the boneless wing. Now that's kind of an oxymoron because a wing isn't boneless, but the boneless wing serves a purpose. In the industry itself, there's a lot of rumors as to why the boneless wing came to exist. Part of the reason, or the most popular reason behind it, is that if you were a restaurant and you were buying the wings, the poultry industry or the processor said, hey, we need to do something because you're not buying enough chicken breast to offset all the wings, and we're getting stuck with a lot of wings. So they say that they came up with the idea of the boneless wing. The boneless wing, again, is it's not a chicken nugget typically because it's more random in size. It has different shapes and different forms, more random in shapes and form as well. Oh, where did I go? I went backwards here. Sorry. So I use the term that not all wings are created equal, and that's the case here. I mean, when you talk about boneless wings, you're going to talk about irregularities in size. You're going to talk about irregularity in shapes and cuts, because typically a boneless wings comes from a whole muscle breast that's cut into chunks, breaded, and then you put your take on whatever kind of sauce that you like on it. They're also known in the industry as chicken chunks or bites, but be aware that when you start going into chicken chunks or bites, just always know whether it's made from whole muscle or whether it is in fact whole muscle or further processed. Because even though it may look like this, it may not be a whole muscle product. So always be aware that can happen when you're dealing with the boneless wing market. And again, it's created as an alternative to bone-in wings. There are just some people that don't necessarily like eating chicken with chicken with bone in it. So it's a popular item. It's very popular on a lot of restaurant menus, and it's a great item for school items as well.
Fun fact about boneless wings is that restaurants that put boneless wings on their menu, even if they had bone-in wings, it did not cannibalize sales from the bone-in wings. It actually increased both bone-in wings and boneless wings at the same time. So they actually saw a lift. So it does work very, very well as an alternative to bone-in wings.
Good point. Forgot to mention that. Thank you. So chicken does have bone in it. And that is the most popular way that we've become accustomed growing up to eating chicken. In the school segment, we've become a little bit more uniformed with our chicken nuggets and our chicken sizes and patties and whatnot. But chicken does have a bone in it, and it still continues to be one of the most popular ways to consume chicken is in its natural state as far as with the bone in it. And that can be fried, that can be oven roasted, it can be breaded, unbreaded. So it has versatility in the sense as a product. Wings are the most popular bone-in part of the chicken. So when you're dealing with menu ideas or whatnot, understand that wings are the most popular bone-in part of the chicken. Why do I say that? Because wings are the most popular bone-in part of the chicken. The industry itself has struggles at times to be able to produce enough wings for the demand. So some of your districts that are listening here may have gone through this, but that's the reality of it. And I always just try to say there are other cuts of the bone that the chicken that have bone in it, which are equally as important, but just understand that wings are most popular and sometimes they struggle. And I just wanted to really point that out because I don't want that in the future to be a problem for anybody, which it can be. And again, it does come roasted or breaded. It is very, very versatile. It's not, you can do so much with bone-in chicken. I mean, I think we have probably about 15 different recipes I mean, chicken cacciatore, you can sauce them, you can put them in a variety of different ways. I mean, in Hispanic, we can do arroz con pollo with a roasted chicken bone-in, that fully cooked. You just make the rice, add the bone-in chicken, and you serve it. So it really does have versatility. Don't think of it just as a bone-in that you got to serve it with maybe a side of mashed potatoes and a vegetable. That's not the case. It has versatility. Sometimes we just got to think outside the box to really find that versatility. And then one thing that I do want to bring up here, it's not raw. It's called myoglobin. So myoglobin is basically what carries the oxygen through our bloodstream. Myoglobin is actually what also differentiates white meat from dark meat. So the more the muscle moves in the legs of a chicken, it generates more myoglobin into the actual meat tissue. And therefore, since it is a flightless bird, the breast and the wings don't get a lot of movement, not a lot of myoglobin, hence the difference in dark meat and white meat. But another important factor of myoglobin, or what happens with myoglobin, is that when you freeze chicken, it exists inside of the bone marrow. And typically when you freeze chicken, the bone marrow or the myoglobin inside the bone marrow tends to seep out into the meat, into the dark meat, and stain it. So even if you cook it to 900 degrees, well, you might not see it then, because by that point the chicken might be charred. But what I'm getting at is it's not going to go away because it's been stained by the myoglobin. So it's important to understand that, because I would probably say one of the highest complaint levels that we get from people is when they bite into a chicken leg and they see that pink meat, they say, oh my God, this is raw. And I promise you it's not, it's just the myoglobin. So I wanted to share that with you guys. And that's, I think it's an important piece. Quincy, anything on that?
No, but that is one of the reasons why dark meat does have more flavor than white meat, at least in my opinion.
I agree. Okay, so the whole muscle. So we've got Mr. Workout Chicken here. So what is whole muscle? I mean, guys, it's pretty simple. Whole muscle means exactly what it means. Whole muscle. Oop, went backwards again. Sorry. So whole muscle is whole muscle. That's exactly what it means. It's you take the chicken breast or you take any cut of chicken that is in its natural state, and either you serve it as it is or you portion it without further processing. That is a whole muscle product. Made from whole muscle product is not whole muscle. Now, while it still uses pieces of whole muscle, typically those pieces are bound together in some way, shape, or form, which we'll show you now here in a little video coming shortly on how it's kind of done by pressure together. But again, it's not whole muscle. And I want to make that clear distinction, because when you're putting products out to bid, make sure that when you're receiving a bid and you've asked for whole muscle, what you're getting is whole muscle, not made with whole muscle. Important distinction to make out there. Again, less processed, and it's perceived better because it is less processed. So they kind of go hand in hand. And one of the things that we've noticed with school districts that do serve whole muscle products, when they do serve whole muscle products, there is a slight increase in participation. And again, I think it just becomes because of the actual consistency of the bite of the product. It's more familiar with what we're used to when we're having a natural whole muscle chicken product. And again, the chicken wars is a perfect example of that. All of the chicken wars that were out there was a whole muscle chicken breast. It wasn't a chicken patty. It was a whole muscle chicken breast breaded in a sandwich. And that was, very successful for the couple of chains that were out there doing that. So now I'm going to go into a video. This video here, again, it's a non-proprietary. This is a manufacturer that makes basically a Revo machine, which is what's used to make further processed chicken. But I'm going to go ahead and keep my mic on here so that you guys can actually, I can speak to the video as it's kind of progressing a little bit so we can see the different pieces of it here. Oh, sorry. I went to get my spotlight and it paused the video. Let's try it again. So in this part here, I'm going to pause it real quick. In this part here, if you can see this product that's being put into the actual hopper here, This product is whole muscle product. It looks like there's a combination of different cuts of meat. I mean, I can't make out exactly what it is, but you can definitely see based on some of these portions that are in here, this is deboned whole muscle product that is going to go into this hopper. And then this hopper is going to kind of force that product up into the actual machine here a little bit further, and we'll see the steps as it progresses. So if you look at this product coming out here, it actually looks like those chicken tenders that we saw in other images. I mean, you would really, unless you knew this was happening, you would have a hard time distinguishing those things. Oh, where we go. Sorry. Let's fast forward a little bit here. We don't want to watch that all over again. So if we see it, this is the actual die machine. So above this is the hopper that pushes the chicken into these dies, kind of, creates a little bit of a push in here. So pressurizes it in here. And then you can see as they pop out as what looks to be chicken tenders, but it's not. It's made from whole muscle chicken tenders, not true tenderloins. This is actually the process where it goes to a wet bath, because it's going to now, this can be the actual batter, but the reality of it is it's just going through here. It's going through the wet bath. It's now going to then allow for the breading to adhere to it. So it's a wet bath first, and then it goes through an actual breader where you can see it gets breaded on the bottom and the top. You see that here in a second. And this video actually has really loud music that's playing into my ears right now that you guys can't hear. So now you see as the product comes out on the other side, it comes out fully breaded. Right there, you could not tell that that was a tender or a tenderloin. Now in this example, it's going to go, that's a fry line. So that's going to go, that's a fryer that based on the distance and the length is the amount of time that it takes for either for it to fully cook it or to just set the breader or the breading. And then it also now is going to talk about if it's not, it can also be ovenable. So it can go into an oven to either finish the process off, or if it's not a baked or a fried product, it's a baked product, like a roasted chicken, it can go in that process as well. So in a nutshell, that's the end product that you had through that process. And again, it was just, that's a very unproprietary. I just found that from a general manufacturer. So that's not specific to any one processor. And I just wanted to make sure that that distinction is there. That's not the way necessarily we do it or anybody else does it. It's just their method of selling their machine.
Real quickly, there is a question in the
Sure.
chat. How would a person tell which product you are being served? I assume that you're talking about the tenderloin versus a tender or a strip. And I was going to say that one of the ways is when you bite into it, you'll notice this product, you can kind of see how like kind of just white that is. It doesn't have any striations like normal muscle would. But the other part is all chicken tenderloins have a tendon is what I meant to say, a tendon up at the top. And so if you find that normally means that you have a tenderloin versus the other. And another way is the cost. If it seems like it's very inexpensive, chances are it's going to be a tender or a strip. If it's a little bit more expensive, then it's probably going to be a tenderloin
True tenderloin.
itself.
Yep. But good question. Okay, so that basically brings us to the end of our presentation. Let me go ahead and try to turn this little thing off here. Let me see. And annotate. And I will turn my camera back on now since we are kind of at the end of here. So if anybody has any questions, aside from the one that was already posted in there, please take a few minutes. I think we've got what, 4 minutes, about 3 to 4 minutes left in our presentation. So please feel free to ask any questions and we'll go ahead and do our best to answer them. Thank you for the nice comments there. I see some comments coming in there. Thank you, guys. I hope you learned something. Listen, at the end of the day, there's a lot more to teach you about chicken that an hour doesn't hold enough time, but I also didn't want to make it where it was completely boring. I thought we drove some key points that are most important to you guys in this industry and in this segment for you guys to take home with you.
Aubrey, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was muted. There's a question in there. Have you seen an impact in the chicken industry from the rise of vegetarianism?
Yeah, I'll bow to you on that one, Quincy, if you can.
So the answer is not completely. I mean, I'm sure that there has been an impact, but overall it hasn't had a huge impact whatsoever. I know vegetarianism, the Beyond Meat and so forth like that really gets a whole lot of play in the media when they talk about it. And I think it is a great story. And it definitely, if you're Burger King, it gets you on the front page and people want to gravitate towards that. But it hasn't made a huge impact in the protein industry. And that's mostly because there's a lot of people that are considered flexitarians. I'm glad my camera was on so you could see the quotation marks. But it's people that maybe eat meat 4, 5, 6 days out of the week and then eat a vegetarian meal maybe 1 or 2 times. So you're still seeing a lot of people eat protein.
And I think I saw a question here come through from Martina about, is Impossible Meat going to produce the Impossible Chicken? We've already seen, I don't know if it's called Impossible Chicken, but I've definitely seen some meat, chicken substitute products that are out there in the market. Yes.
Yeah, there's one from, it's called Chick, in Chicken Nuggets from Morningstar Farms. So it is a fake chicken nugget.
I think we're good. I mean, I think we did it right on time too, 4:59. That's not too bad.
Yeah,
Listen,
yeah,
I appreciate the time. I appreciate, the opportunity to come out here and share with you guys. Quincy, thank you for joining us from Kansas City. And again, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always available.
Thank you, Jose and Quincy. This was a really great session, and I know I definitely learned a lot. I did not know that much about chicken, apparently. So thank you all for attending. I just want to tell you about our sessions tomorrow. At 2:45, we'll have a great session on handling tricky employee absenteeism. And then we will conclude the training week with a session on diversity from Dr. James Pogue. So I hope to see you all there and have a great evening.
Bye.